thought what I do is if we're going to give you these tiles, it's kind of nice to know how might that look in my classroom from kindergarten to grade 3. And I'm including just a very basic kindergarten introduction into this one as well, simply because we know that with everything that's going on, we have some kiddos who are definitely lower than where they should be in expectations at this point in time. So you might need to use this very basic introduction to them in your classroom. But all of these instructions are in the slideshow that is linked. So when you're taking a look at this document, you'll see lead day presentation linked, as well as on the PLC lead site. But I have put these instructions into a couple Google Docs, and they are linked in the long range planning documents, linked to the applicable grades. So you can definitely find those in there as well. So I've been updating those long range planning documents with a variety of stuff, and I'll come back to that later on today. But here's a couple simple things that you can do with them. So I might put 5 tiles in front of students. This could be done small group, this could be done large group. You decide how this works depending on your kiddos. But if I need to work on one-to-one correspondence, I might have those kiddos literally just go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and just naming 1 as I move them. And you'll notice I move these significantly away from the other one, because if all a kid does, if they're struggling with one-to-one correspondence, if all they do is just tap, what we see happening is that they will re-tap the same tiles. So if you physically make them move it into a different location, then that will help them build that one-to-one correspondence. After they've got that one-to-one correspondence, you could also include the phrase, that's one, that's another one, that's another one, to build in that next piece there. But what you'll want to do, because we want to live in the world of arrays, we want to live in the world of rectangles, is have them build a rectangle as they are doing this. So they might build a nice long rectangle, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then I'm also going to pull 1, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. Because we tend to build up additive thinking, but we forget to build the subtraction, and that's why kiddos struggle with it. So you always build it, and then after that you always remove it. So counting up, counting down, all at the same time, even if all I'm doing is saying 1, 1, 1, 1. The next natural step would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5. Sorry. Now I've got 4, 3, 2, 1. And now there's nothing left in there. So counting up, counting down constantly. I can add 1 as I go through. So starting to introduce that language, and you can use that in kindergarten as well. Or if they don't have that additive thinking yet, now I'm going to remove 1 each time and introduce that language in there. When I've done that, I can have a partner. So we'll just flip. I've got some red tiles here, so maybe I'm sitting with a partner, and then we both go 1, 1, and we match them up. Sorry, I don't know how well you can see them. There we go. 1, 1. So I'm building up that one-to-one correspondence here as I build connections to my partner. So it's one-to-one for myself, but as well as one-to-one to somebody else. So that's a nice thing. And we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you've kind of got that small group built in choral counting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as we go backwards as well. The other thing that I definitely want to do is, and we've talked about this lots in the past, we want to spread it out. So if I spread this out, how many do I have? Sorry, you can't see that one on the screen. How many do I have? Do I still have the same number as my partner? If I squish them really close together, how many do I have? Do I still have the same number as my partner? And just playing with that, because we need them to know that it doesn't matter how far they are apart, how close they are together, how messy it is, how neat it is. If I haven't added any, if I haven't removed any, it is still 5. That conservation of number is why our kids struggle with addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. We see it all the time as we go through that. So after I know my kids have conservation of number, and they are building that, and they've got one-to-one correspondence, then I can start adding in some other pieces. So I'm going to just use my hands. I could have them throw this in a bag and then shake it out. But I'll dump this, And how many do I have now? Regardless of color, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I still have 5. But now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 red. I've got 1 blue. How many do I have altogether? And I can do that in kindergarten. I can do that in grade 1 before I even represent this in an addition statement. Just how many do I have? Let's shake it again. Okay. Now I've got 3 and I've got 2. I've got 2 and I've got 3. Both those same representations. I have 5 altogether, 2 red, 3 blue, 5 altogether, 3 blue, 2 red. Doesn't matter which way I represent it. Altogether, I have 5. And you can start to hear those addition equations in there. After they've got that, because remember, we always do the concrete until they've got a really solid understanding of the concrete before we ever introduce the abstract. So we don't represent the numeral 2, we don't represent the numeral 3 on the board until they can just verbalize it. Once they can verbalize it, then we can, as the teacher, I'll start saying, how many do I have altogether? I've got 5. 5 is 2 red and 3 blue. So I might write down 5 is 2 red and 3 blue with the words. And then I might write 5 equals 2 plus 3, or 2, the numeral 2 blue plus the numeral 3, 2 red plus 3 blue. And then I can introduce 2 plus 3. And remembering to do that 5 equals 2 plus 3, 5 equals 3 plus 2. So lots of that playing. And the beauty of this, there's no worksheets involved at this point in time. After I've done this for a while, then I can have them record on a whiteboard. And if I need to record that for prosperity, I can take a photo of it. We don't always need a worksheet. Worksheets are meant for at the end when we're practicing. But you'll notice on our long range planning, I'm being really intentional by including the stuff in there about how do I teach the idea, not how do I practice the idea. Because you guys are already amazing at creating and finding those things and practicing. But what are the things I'm doing deliberately to intentionally teach the concept? So that's what you're going to find in the long range planning document. So I'm definitely going to play a lot in this world. I want to live in 5. I want my kids by the end of 5 to just know all the combinations of 5. That's grade, starting in kindergarten, just playing, but not recording. Grade 1, playing and then recording. Grade 2, if they don't have 5, that's where I start. Playing and then recording, but never, ever, ever rushing that. Because what I want you to think about is when you are thinking about mathematics, if 5 is one of those pillars that you're asking kids to build their mathematical understanding on, if I try to build 10 on top of 5, but 5 is shaky, what's going to happen to 10? It's just going to fall apart. And then your foundational learning isn't there, and you can't build upon a rocky foundation. So you have permission, if you need to, spend 2 months building 5, take the time to build 5. Yes, you have a curriculum to get through. We'll get there. Don't worry about it, but make sure they have 5. And then it's got to be solid. They have to be able to do this without thinking about it. Then we build 10. And then we build all of the other numbers. And if it takes us 6 months to get 10 solidly built, regardless of what grade they're in, they could be your grade 3 student. I don't care. If it takes till January, it takes till January. Because they can't do 100 till they have 10. They can't do 1,000 until they have 100, which they can't do till they have 10, which they can't do till they have 5. So permission to slow it all down and live in 5 and 10. All right. We talked last year, a couple of years ago when we were doing equality, we talked about those place value maps where I have 5 at the top. I don't know how well you can see this little image here. You'll see it in here, but that place value map, it is linked in your long range planning document as well, but it doesn't have to be fancy. Here's 5 tiles. Maybe they're all red. I'm going to put some on the left and the rest on the right. So I started with 5. How many do I have altogether? I've got 5 altogether, 2 and 3. I've got 5 altogether, 1 and 4. But regardless of how I split it up, it's still 5 altogether. And you'll notice it's back to, I've got 5, I remove 4, there's 1, there's my subtraction, 4 and 1 is 5. So constantly bringing addition and subtraction at the exact same time. It's not today we do addition, tomorrow we do a subtraction. It's subtraction, addition, put it back together. So always, always doing that. And again, we talk about it, and then we record the numerical versions of that, the abstract versions of those equations. And again, kindergartens can be doing the exact same thing because it's building that conservation of number. I'm going to put some here. I'm going to put some here. Count this side up. Count that side up. How many altogether? They won't get to the point where they're recording addition and subtraction equations, but it's that language that you're starting to introduce, which is really important. And they're only going to numbers to 10 anyways. The other thing we should be using, when they get to higher grades, we do 10 frames, but in the beginning, we do 5 frames. And there are 5 frames linked in that long range planning documents. I'm going to fill this up with 5. I'm going to make some of them red, some of them blue. How many are red? How many are blue? How many altogether? There's my 5 frame. How many am I missing? Well, I've got 4. I need 1 more to fill it up. There's that addition, that subtraction question. I'm going to put some red, 3 plus 2 blue. Altogether, I've got 5. So if I've got 5, and I don't know how many blue I have, how many would I need to fill it up in there? Again, visual before you ever record the equations and before they ever record. And you record before they ever record. Now, all of that, you're going to repeat with 10. You're going to take 10 tiles and you're going to do all those same activities again. You don't even have to plan for it because you already know it. The kiddos already know the process, and they're going to build that really solid understanding of what makes 10. Once they know 5, once they know 10, then you can be playing with all of those other numbers as well, connecting to them. So for kiddos, 5, and then 4, 3, 2, 1, then 10, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So always connecting to the 5 frame and 10 frame. After that, then you can be taking these same tiles, and we've been doing by 1s. So now we're going to start to get into skip counting. But this time we're going to do by 2s. So there's 2, there's 2, there's 2, there's 2, there's 2. Removing 2, removing 2, removing 2, removing 2, removing 2. Really understanding that's 2. That's 1 2, 2 2s, 3 2s, 4 2s, 5 2s. Leading into multiplicative thinking for grade 3, but grade 2s and 1s can still do this. That's 1 2, 2 2s, 3 2s, 4 2s, 5 2s. I may even go 5 2s, 4 2s, 3 2s, 2 2s, 1 2s. That counting up, counting down. Now, one of the things when I taught grade 3 and we were doing skip counting and my kiddos were struggling with skip counting, we used to walk down the hallway and we would whisper, we'd go, 1, 2, as we walk, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, as we walk down, because they don't just naturally start counting by 2s, but we can give them that whisper for their left leg, loud for their right leg. So they're starting to hear the 2, 4, 6, 8. So as they're doing this, they might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hopefully you can hear me whisper 9, 10 as they are counting that. Then they can go 10, 9, 7, and then count backwards as well, which is interesting when you go that way. So then they've got that. They're learning to skip count by 2s. They're building that rectangular array. They're leading into multiplicative thinking, but they're still doing additive thinking at this point for grade 1 and grade 2. And you've got all of that. When I'm doing this, I might change this and say, now I've got 1 2 that's blue. Oops. And I've got 1 2 3 4 2s that are red. 2 and 8. So I can start to create those equations. Altogether, I've got 5 2s. So I can play with that as well. But I also want to split it this way when I'm doing that, especially once I get to grade 3. So when I split this way, I've got 1 5 and 2 5s. So now I'm really getting to the whole multiplicative thinking. 1 5, 2 5s, 5 2s, 2, and so on. All right. So then after we've been playing with this lots, or even before I'm worried about that, and I'm just doing other stuff, because I do believe math is cyclical And I'm going to keep touching on the same ideas throughout the year. It's not like we do addition and subtraction in the beginning of the year and then I never touch it again. I just get more and more complex numbers, which is why when you look at our long range plan, that timeline for the year, you'll see in the beginning we do addition subtraction for 10, and then at near the end, then we're building in for 100. We can just keep playing with these same things, but the numbers get more and more complex throughout the year. And that's when kiddos will start making connections between addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and they'll build on complexity in there as well. So one of the activities I would ask grade 1s and 2s and 3s, because I'll be looking at it through a different lens. One will be additive thinking, one will be number sense, and one will be multiplicative thinking. But if I have 12 tiles here, how many different rectangles can I make using those 12 tiles? So I'm going to actually ask you to imagine 12 tiles in your head. And when you do this, one of the things, the only rule is that when you're doing it, you can't make it so that you've got blank spaces. This would not be allowed. You must have, this would be allowed. That it's not 12 tiles, but that would be allowed because it's a filled in rectangle. This would not be allowed because it's not filled in. This would be allowed because it's filled in. But I must use exactly 12 tiles. So while you are imagining 12 tiles built in a rectangle, and then a different way. What's a different way I could build those 12 tiles, a rectangle using exactly 12 tiles? And once I've got that, if you've got more time, can I think of more? So in the amount of time that you've got, how many different ways can you visualize 12 tiles? And then I'm just going to stop sharing this screen and switch back in a moment. So. Okay, so you should, it's just coming up. You should be able to see the question. So I want you to have some of those in your head. Now, some of you may have built the rectangle on the left-hand side, the array on the left-hand side. Some of you may have built the rectangle, the array on the right-hand side. Notice I'm using two words at the same time to help kiddos learn what array means. I'm connecting it to a word they already know about rectangle. So when you take a look at those two particular buildings of rectangles using exactly 12 tiles, are these the same representations or are they different representations? So in the chat window, feel free to type in, are they the same or are they different? Once you've decided, same, different, feel free to type that in the chat window. And this is an interesting one. And I always ask this question because people, including mathematicians, bringing in mathematical discourse is always important. And it's always important to tell kiddos that people disagree on these things. There are people out there who say this is completely different because I've got 3 rows of 4 and 4 rows of 3. That's 2 different things. And then there are people who say these are the same thing because if I'm looking at the first one and then I just change my perspective without touching it and I just turn my head sideways, I can see the other one. I haven't touched anything. I haven't added anything. I haven't removed anything. But just by changing my perspective, I can see that it's the same. Now, I would qualify that with it's the same value. And things like that, because we've talked a lot about that with equality. When I take a look at both the first one, can I see 3 4s in there? And it's too bad you can't see my mouse, but if I look, I can see 3 4s. When I look at the second one, can I see 3 4s? Yeah, it's the other way. When I look at the first one, can I see 4 threes? Yeah. And when I look at the second one, can I see 4 threes? I can. And when you're talking grade 1 and grade 2, you're building that sense of what makes 12, but you're also skip counting by threes, you're skip counting by fours. You're building that commutative property in there when you're looking at multiplication. You're looking at 3 fours is the same number of tiles as 4 threes. And in this case, it's the same representation. I can see 3 fours and I can see 4 threes. It's the same total quantity in there. So if all I've done is changed my perspective, if all I've done is tilted my head and I can see it, it's the same. And it's really fascinating when you do this. I did this with a couple teachers who couldn't be here today. And I had one teacher, I built the one on the left, and she was sitting across from me. And then I had the other teacher was sitting perpendicular to us. So the teacher sitting across from me saw the same visual I did. But the teacher sitting beside me saw the second visual because her perspective was different, which is absolutely awesome. So just engaging in those conversations with kiddos is really going to make a big difference. But when I look at arrays, I really want to connect to that 3 fours and 4 threes. I can see both. If I turn my head, it's the same thing. So love building for multiplicative thinking using arrays, because I want you to imagine, for those of you who are teaching grade 3, if I had built 3 groups of 4, could I show the commutative property without touching the tiles? You can't, because you can't then just switch your brain to 4 groups of 3, because groups of is very much additive thinking. And there's nothing wrong with starting there, but we want to get kids to the array piece, because this array is going to be helpful to them in grade 4 and grade 5 and grade 10 as they're getting into more and more complex multiplicative thinking that they do there. So lots of stuff there. Okay, so we've already talked about that. Then what I do for grade 3s, not necessarily grade 2s, but you could if you wanted to. I built in the long range planning document for grade 3, in the multiplication section, you will find a blank multiplication table that doesn't, all it has is the numbers on the top, the numbers on the side. It doesn't have any of the numbers written in the multiplication table. By the way, a blank multiplication table is allowed on SLAs and on PATs, because it doesn't have any numerical answers in it. But it has all the answers in it, which is interesting. So when I take that 3x4 array and I put it on a blank multiplication table, you'll notice I don't have any zeros in here, but I can see it there, and I can see the 3 fours, and I can see the 4 threes in there. So when a kiddo is using a multiplication table, they're not looking for, and I know you can't see my fingers, but they're not putting their finger on the 3 and their finger on the 4 and kind of putting them together to find the number 12. It's not an intersection. That's not what multiplication is. Why, though, do we put the 12 in that spot? Well, it's because that 12 represents the intersection of 4 threes or 3 fours. It's got that big picture there. So preempting everything with a blank multiplication array, putting those tiles right onto the array, and they can see it, and they can see why they'd write it. So they might take off that bottom right-hand tile and write the number 12. And they might take off all the tiles and they draw the 3x4 or the 4x3 array in there, and they can just represent that with the number 12 in the bottom right. And then when we could also take, well, some of you built 2x6s. Well, let's draw that array. 2 6s. Draw it. Where does the 12 go? Draw the 6x2 on the blank multiplication table. Draw it. Where does the 12 go? And even for kiddos who aren't doing multiplication yet, they can still skip count. 3, 6, 9, 12. 1 3, 2 3s, 3 3s, 4 3s. It becomes a lot more natural for them when they see it in this kind of format. Other things that I can do starting in kindergarten, it doesn't matter, but I might say, here's a sticky note. How many tiles do you think it's going to take to cover that sticky note? 1, 10, 100, and build those estimation skills. Okay, put 1 on there. Now how many do you think? Oh, they'll start refining their guesses. Okay, let's cover that sticky note at the top. So you've got, maybe it takes, sticky notes are what, 3s, 3 by 3s. So it'll take 3, because that's why we bought the 1-inch tiles. So they fit so nicely instead of 3/4 inch. It'll take 3 across. So if it took 3 across, how many do you think it'll take? Okay, let's add another row. How many do you think it'll take? So then it slowly builds in those estimation skills so that they don't start guessing 100 or unrealistic numbers. So using reference in order to build that. And then you can do it for any other object. And they don't have to be in full inches. Maybe it's a little bit more than 9 tiles that it'll take. Who knows? So lots and lots of reference things in there. And grade 3s, because you now have a grade 10 outcome in your grade 3 curriculum, which is exploring inches. Another reason why we have inches, right? So then they can use this. How many of these tiles will it take to count along your desk? How many tiles will it take to count along a meter stick? And play with those. So lots of opportunities there. Other things that I could do is ask kiddos to use these tiles. That's why I wanted the double-sided tiles. Make a pattern with those tiles. If I have 5 tiles and I'm making a pattern with them, can I make half of them red, half of them blue? Why not? If I have 10 tiles, can I make half of them red, half of them blue? And grade 1, we start introducing the language of 1/2. Well, they can use that. They can start first half, second half. They can alternate halves. It's lots of opportunities for them to play with the tiles to create patterns in there as well. And they don't have to be straight line patterns either. So lots of opportunities there.